What was you to go, you know what, I'm ready to do this? Like, was there something that, for someone who's watching this thinking, I don't know if I'm ready for someone, is there something you would say, boy, if you're feeling this or that, it's worth doing?
It was a mixture of so many things, so I'm trying to think how to couch this. I think number one, it was the need to believe in myself. So I'm at this precipice of where I can take this next step. And I think I've been looking around for approval from others. And I'm just like, so what do you think? And I'm always the person who will ask someone else and I think that's strength. I like being able to run my thoughts past somebody and my ideas. But there comes a point where you're like, okay, there are only so many more inputs that I need. Like, we need to now go. And so figuring out what it was that was keeping me from being able to take that next step forward. And then also really trying to set my foundation for, like, I was just like, I need, like, the person who's doing this with me for sure is me. And so I need to make sure that I'm up to the challenge and I'm ready to go.
Welcome, everybody. This is Mike Thorne. I've got this term I'm using called TrustCast. And it's this idea of how do you bring our North Star Rising workbook and video series to life. And I'm very, very fortunate to be sitting in my home. So this is not like a podcast in a studio or anything. It's just a real conversation with some amazing people. A couple folks here I want to introduce that are with me. One is Sheila, who's been a friend of mine for 8 years maybe? 8, 9 years, something like that?
8 or 9.
And Helen, who also I've met now. They'll introduce themselves in a bit. I also want to mention a couple people that have been instrumental in getting the workbook and the video off the ground. They couldn't be here today. One is Sam, who did a lot of work putting the workbook together, and you'll hear from her.
Hello, my name is Sam. I am Mike's social media manager, aka life storyteller. If you know Mike, you know that he is all heart. Someone who's redefining leadership through trust, purpose, and real human connection. And getting to bring that message to life online has truly been a dream gig for me. I get to help shape the way his voice shows up in the world, and it's honestly one of the most meaningful and fun roles that I've ever had. I'm learning so much about leadership, storytelling, and just showing up with clarity and intention. And honestly, when your work gives you goosebumps, you know that you're in the right place. Mike's North Star Rising workbook has unexpectedly become part of my everyday life, not just professionally, but personally. It's become a conversation my husband and I keep coming back to, especially as he's been going through a really tough season of trying to find a new career after being in the same one for 10 plus years. He's incredibly smart, capable, but the constant rejection emails were starting to chip away at his confidence and sense of purpose. But as I worked with Mike and started asking my husband some of the powerful questions from the workbook, we really started to uncover things that he hadn't even seen before. And with each conversation, he's been regaining a sense of direction. And just that boost of confidence is coming back. And personally, this process has mirrored my own journey with grief. I wrote a children's book on love, loss, and resilience after losing my dad and our family dog shortly after that. And that kind of loss stays with you. But being part of building something like this workbook really reminded me that it's not about fixing the pain. It's about creating space to sit with it, to reflect, and to slowly find that clarity in the middle of it all. Mike's workbook isn't just helping leaders. It's helping people. People like me, people like my husband. It invites you back to yourself. It helps you reconnect with what matters most, especially when everything feels unclear. And getting to create something so meaningful with Mike has been one of the most grounding, life-giving experiences I have ever had. It's a reminder that in our most human moments, clarity is still possible. We all have a North Star. We just need a little help remembering where to look, and I think that this workbook does exactly that.
And then Mel Salme, she is someone who did the video work with me. She's now living in Finland. She was living in Maine, so she couldn't make it here today, obviously, although I tried to convince her to go from Finland to Maine, but that didn't work. And I want to thank Nate Wind, who's here to help us make sure this video comes to life and you guys get a chance to experience it. So what is a TrustCast? I made the term up. I did look it up. It sounds like there's some versions of it. I think it's this idea of finding a space of trust. And today we've got an opportunity. Helen is courageously going to talk about her experience going through the workbook and the video series. And Sheila, as I believe, will be a great, what do you call yourself, a color commentator?
I like to say color commentator, yes.
She's got great perspective and humor and insights as we navigate this together. Why is this important? I really worry about how we're teaching leadership in today's world. I think people, when they have more purpose and clarity, will end up leading both their family and their businesses more purposefully and with more values versus this command control situation I think we're in right now. And so I want to be able to bring something that's pretty straightforward for people to exercise so they can do that. So this is going to be raw, it's going to be real, and we'll hopefully have some laughs because we're just winging it as we go through it here. I'm going to do my best to be the host here, but we're just going to let it rip. So hang in there with us. But before we dive into the actual work, I did want to go back in time, and I wanted to ask both of you, how did we actually meet and what the first impressions were, and then why do we stay connected? So I'm going to start. So Sheila, I think we just were talking. I met Sheila probably, we think about 8 years ago, and it was at a coffee shop, maybe up in Falmouth, I think maybe. I don't remember how we got connected up there, but we did. And what I remember about Sheila after that is she was going to a board meeting, if I remember correctly. And the idea was, could I help her with some project related to the board? And I don't remember how many days it was after, but she mentioned, like, I talked to my chair board and I explained to him who you were, and you kind of explained me, and like, I don't really know about who this guy is, but I think he can help us, or something like that, which is typically how I get explained, by the way. But you've been a great friend for a long time, and we still get together to do ice cream and catch up on family and so on. So that's what I remember about how we got connected. And I stay together with you because I think Sheila's one of those real people. You just have this amazing gift to be able to sit down with someone, and we can talk about anything. And there's no judgment, which is what I love the most about you.
Thank you very much. I feel the same. Thanks.
What do you remember? Did I get the story?
There was somebody who connected us after a workshop through Maine Outdoor Brands.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And this person approached me and said, you need to meet this friend of mine, this colleague. So we met for coffee, and I just remember coming away thinking, you're incredibly insightful. And I remember realizing, and we didn't really get to know each other that well over that first coffee, but I was struck by how differently I feel like you look at the world than I do, but we connected so well.
Yeah.
And the coffee conversations have continued, clearly. So
Yeah, this is so much about human connection in terms of today's world today, so thank you. Helen, I remember I had gotten injured in a race, and I'm not a big fan of going to PT. My experience has been very negative. It's always it feels like you're a robot in this routine. And so I'd gotten injured in a race. My wife goes, you need to go to, your place is called Physical Therapies of Scarborough, is it?
Scarborough Physical Therapy.
Scarborough, okay, I got it in reverse. Yeah. And I said, no, and she said, no, you got to go. And so when I called to the organization's credit, they asked me, what's going on? What do I need? What works well? What are you trying to do? And I'm very, very blessed that they said, you need to work with Helen. And as I said, the only Helen I ever met was my aunt. And I thought, I've never met a Helen before, so I didn't know what to expect. I remember sitting in the chair, and I was facing this way, and you came around the corner, and you just had this energy right out of the gate, and I thought, wow, this is going to be different. And what was really interesting, I don't remember what we did first, but you were so knowledgeable about the body and how the body moves. And at first you're like, no, my injury's here, but you were so like, take a step back. Let's talk about how the body actually works. It might be this, that. And I was like, wow, this person's really, really deeply knowledgeable about this topic. And then we started talking some business stuff, I think, right? I remember. And then every time I go in there, it was like either a therapy session for me or for you, or it was a business consultation for her or for me, is what I remember. And I always enjoyed going to PT, not because of the PT as much, although I did enjoy that, but your knowledge of how the body works and how it operates, it was just so impressive. And then the business acumen. And then I think at some point, I had connected you to the Entrepreneur Association up here because I thought you'd be a great fit for them. We've just stayed friends ever since. So I thank you for everything you brought to my life. I feel like my body moves better now, and I have a better understanding how to keep my body moving at my age, so thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah. It's so funny that you say your aunt's name was Helen, because I'm named after a great aunt Helen, and so
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. All
yeah.
right.
So I guess it's meant to be an aunt.
Yeah.
It's not a name you hear as much anymore, but so
No.
it was right in my head. I go, okay, my Aunt Helen. I remember my Aunt Helen. But then you came out like, nope, that's not my Aunt Helen. That's not the same. So,
But I just have to say, when I first met you, I was at the very early stages of trying to figure out what I was trying to bring into the world. And you were the first person that I hadn't known previously that I got to introduce this idea to. And I just remember, like, immediately when I met you, I was just like, oh, he's interesting. Like, he's got some stuff. And so when we started to dig into it, of course, we were focusing on the physical therapy, but you were the first person that I wanted to cross that line with and ask questions. And you allowed me to be curious and ask you questions and get answers. And it was a very empowering experience for me, and I should have been making it empowering for you during your physical therapy. But it was that changed my life in a lot of ways, and namely being introduced to the Maine Center of Entrepreneurs through you, and then being able to work with you afterwards and keep tackling goals for both of us. So
yeah. Look, this is just such an interesting discussion about how important human connections are, I think, and why we stay connected and how we stay connected. It's funny how life works, but I think it's really important. The amount of loneliness in this country is unbelievable. People don't have friends, don't have connections. So I thank you for both of you for sharing all that. Now, what I'd like to really do, I think it'd be fun. Let's go back when we were 10, 12 years old. Nate, you'll love this one. Maybe I'm going to ask you to do something on this. What did you pretend to be for hours when nobody was watching? So I'm going to start with mine just to kind of kick it off, give flavor. We had a basketball court in our house. We lived in Lunenburg, Massachusetts. And when I was 10 or 12, the Red Sox, it was during 1975, it was Freddie Lynn days and Jim Rice. You're a big Red Sox fan. And then Larry Bird with the Celtics. And so we had the garage, it was a one-car garage, and I would take the baseball. And we had this much space on the where the baseball was before the garage was, and I was pitching. Or I was hitting, and I was always, going out. I was pretending I was Freddie Lynn because I was left-handed. And then basketball, I was Larry Bird. And I kept dreaming about, God, I'd love to be a professional athlete someday. That was always my dream as I went through all that. And I also became very enamored with Hank Aaron. He was someone that back in 1974 of April was about to break Babe Ruth's home run record. And as a kid, being adopted, I always had these abandonment issues and trust issues, and I watched this man he was a man of color, breaking a historic Babe Ruth, where everybody was like this mythic creature. And the vitriol in the country at that time, the racial tensions were unbelievable. And yet here was a man in grace. He just was able to plow through it all. He was getting criticized a lot on one side. On the other side, people were cheering him on like, this is an amazing record. And it was the first time my dad let me stay up late at night. And I think it was 9:12 at night. Hank Aaron gets up to late in the fourth inning off of Al Dowling and hits a home run. And the place erupts. The light bulbs are going off on the TV. And I thought, I'm going to be a fucking professional baseball player. And I started following other people that were breaking the mold, which is why I'm kind of I don't do well with status quo. Billie Jean King was big back in the day, and Muhammad Ali, and people like that is where I gravitated to, and sports became the place that I found. But it all started sitting there pretending I was going to be some professional athlete, and I've always loved sports ever since. What about you?
my turn. So I guess I it's so funny when you brought that up. I was like, immediately I had two different things that I would pretend to be. So number one, when I was growing up, my sister would always be like, you're going to be a scientist. Like, you're going to be a doctor. And I always had those little kits, and I always played with the chemistry sets and the stuff. And, I'd be mixing my little things together and, and not knowing anything about chemistry at the time. And so I would pretend that I was like, an esteemed scientist, which was like really interesting for a 12-year-old. And then alternatively, which probably is more normal, I wanted to be an actress. Like, I loved like all the like shows, especially musicals. And so I would always like do the embarrassing thing of being in my mirror and doing the singing and the stuff. But I just knew that I wanted to share something with the world. And so I think weirdly enough, as we're talking this through and hearing that kind of thread for you and this thread for me, I'm suddenly seeing like how that comes together as you get older. So yeah.
That is part of what I was going to say, looking at your life today, how connected do you feel to that spark or dream? Do you see glimmers of it, or does it feel like it's really miles away and it kind of went away, or?
I think it's actually, as I'm sitting here, like thinking about it, it comes together a lot more than I thought. So I do love presenting to people about science, and so I guess I found the marriage of the two. So that's actually really fun to realize. Yeah.
So some of you are probably sitting there going, I thought we were going to talk about the workbook, Mike. And I'm starting here because I think all of us have these dreams and insights that we really want, and we don't always allow ourselves to get there. We're getting blocked by things, which when we get to the workbook, we'll talk through it all. But I think it's important to kind of reflect back on what that's like. So what about you? What was your thing you pretended to be when no one was watching for you?
Well, I feel like I came into the world with a twin sister. So I wasn't alone a lot, which is kind of an interesting dynamic when you think about it.
By the way, real quick, Helen, if her sister was here, you wouldn't know whether it was Sheila or her sister.
Oh, really?
Both the way they look, talk, sound, it is, I'm not sure, is this really, can you have your license, please? Are you really Sheila? I met her sister at an event, and I was like, no, it was on a phone.
Yes.
And I was like, wait a minute, is this a prank? This sounds like Sheila. And then I realized they're identical twins. I was like, oh my God, they are so.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
So it is interesting, though, because I really don't remember the alone times, yet I grew up in Foxborough on this small side street near Uptown. And so between 10 and 12, we were definitely played sports in the neighborhood. It was before there was a lot of organized sports for people. I graduated from high school in 77, so there weren't clinics for girls when I was in middle school, but I played a ton of sports in our neighborhood, unorganized, learned a lot about myself in the street playing football, two-hand touch with the neighborhood boys, a couple of trips to the ER for x-rays, all that. But what I remember, so we were really playing, but I wasn't pretending to be an athlete, but I loved sports. What I remember we did a lot of, my sister and the friends across the street who now live in Maine, we would put on plays. We would do a lot of singing and our attempts at dancing, mostly singing, and we would try to raise money for different causes. We'd have tickets for the neighborhood. Yeah, I wish I had video of some of those. I'm not sure how high level those performances were. But my sister and I do still love to sing for fun. She actually Susan lived on the West Coast for decades, and when we turned 50, a young friend of hers who was fighting a battle against cancer, was a talented musician, ended up passing away. But before James died, he inspired Susan to go sing in a rock band. So she was in a garage band at 50, and when we turned 60, we were throwing a surprise party. There was a karaoke set up on my front porch. We sang quite loudly in our neighborhood till the Falmouth police came and shut that party down. Oh, no. So we've always loved to sing, and sports weaves into my life just naturally. So
That's cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
That's cool. All right, what I'd like to do is, so the workbook I've been talking about, I'd like to dive into a little bit. It was several years ago, 20 years now that I think about it, I was president of Russell Athletic, and I was not prepared for the job. The company thought I was, but I wasn't, and I got fired. And like anybody who gets fired, it's a very demoralizing experience, and especially as I started thinking about that 9-year-old kid that was dealing with all the abandonment trust. I thought I was worthless again, and I spent probably 3 or 4 days just like in mourning, and thought I'd never recover until some people reached out to me. Back in those days, it wasn't Sheila and Helen, it was someone else. First person was Scott Creelman. And he said, whenever you're ready, Thorny, that's what my name was, they called me that, let's have a conversation. And he was someone I had worked for before, and I trusted him. He was part of my early trust committee before I even created this. And he walked me through what role I played and what happened. And I tried to figure out why did I behave the way I did, and why did I end up getting in the situation I did. And then the employees that, as I left, I had about 100 and something employees, I think, at the time, started sending me emails about the experience they had with me and why they were sad that I was leaving and so on. And I was like, this is so interesting. I got fired. I did a terrible job running this thing, and yet the employees had a different experience. So I had to really understand, and that's when I started thinking about, well, what is it if you have clarity where you're going and who you are, which I didn't at the time, and you communicate that clarity, will people start to come around, surround you, and you can all elevate together. And so when I left in 2006 and went to Yankee Candle, that was on my mind. I said, I want to go someplace where the people matter, and how can I create a whole different experience? And I had to work for people that I found were already doing that. And I met a lady named Dorn Exford, who was my next person in my trusted community. And Doran sat down with me and said, Mike, I want you to really understand how we operate. You're going from a very male-dominated, swearing, sports-oriented culture to Yankee Candle, which we had a very eclectic group of people working, men, women, all walks of life. And they said, you're going to have to adjust everything about you. And of course, I didn't want anyone to even know who I was because I was still dealing with all the trauma from my 9-year-old self. And she was the first person who asked me a question, which didn't want to answer back in the day, but she said, Mike, I think you're struggling with the question in your head. And I said, what do you mean? And she was the head of learning development. And she said, I think you're asking yourself, if people really knew me, would they even like me? It's like, oof, that was a gut punch. But from that moment forward, she was another person I found I trusted with. And so I started realizing, what if I got the right people around me who had certain skills, who I felt comfortable and trusted, that could give me the feedback so I could start to really get better at what I was doing. But the first step required me to have self-reflection and really open myself up. And I realized that the adoption was holding me back. It was like a jail versus a school of learning. And so she gave me some tools to start working towards it. And this first part of the workbook, which is around self-reflection, is how it all started for me. And she really made me do that. And some of the questions in here, and what I'd like to do, Helen, you've already gone through this, I think, a little bit. Mm-hmm. I'd like to have you kind of share what it was like going through this and how, if this was effective. And look, just for the audience here, we're just test driving this. So if it ends up, we got to tweak this and play around. Let's get the results we want. We will. So this is live here. We're just going to see, when you went through this, what was it like for you to just kind of do that own self-reflection for you? What was that experience like for you?
So the self-reflection, so number one, I think starting with that first question.
Can you read the first question just so everybody has it in case?
Yeah, so where am I today in my personal life? And so, I'm mid-20s, 26, and it's an interesting time of life because it's a lot of transition. Yeah. It's a lot of trying to figure out, trying to ask the questions of okay, so what does this look like for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? It can be overwhelming because you're finally getting to that spot of you're entering the world. And so answering this, because I am in this moment of transition and trying to figure out, what impact do I want to make? What is my purpose? Where do I want to see my personal life and my professional life go? Right. I almost sat down and was like, life A, life B. And I was just like, this is where I'm at right now. And then I started to do the reflecting because I follow rules. It said module 1, question 1. I started with module 1, question 1. Mike was like, you can bounce around. And I was like, I can't. So I started with that. And I was just like, it was a really amazing opportunity to be like, okay, wow, where do I see this going? And being alone and doing the reflection alone, I was just like, as you're talking about being 12 and dreaming about what you're going to be, I could be 26 and dream about what I might be and that life be. So I think it was a really harrowing moment of being like, where am I really? And what does that really feel like? And sitting with that. And then being like, what could it feel like and where could it go? So
interesting.
Yeah.
Just curious, what made you even go do this? Hopefully it wasn't because I asked you to see if this would help you. Did you look at this and say, boy, I think this, I'm curious, what is it? Because part of this, I think for those of you just watching on here, there is 2 reasons why people who know they need to take action, they have awareness. They're like, I'm not happy, my life isn't what I want it to be, but they don't take action. And I think I was listening to a Tony Robbins podcast, and it finally clicked. And it's either because you have a fear or anger that holds you back. Some fear and anger. Mine was the fear of being abandoned, obviously. I didn't have any anger. I was angry too, as more. I realized I was angry at my mother until I met her and all that. But at first it was fear. But once you get over it, so in your case, what was you to go, you know what, I'm ready to do this? Was there something that, for someone who's watching this thinking, I don't know if I'm ready for someone. Is there something you would say, boy, if you're feeling this or that, it's worth doing? Anything?
It was a mixture of so many things. So I'm trying to think how to couch this. I think number one, it was the need to believe in myself. So I'm at this precipice of where I can take this next step. And I think I've been looking around for approval from others. And I'm just like, so what do you think? And I'm always the person who will ask someone else, and I think that's strength. I like being able to run my thoughts past somebody and my ideas. But there comes a point where you're like, okay, there are only so many more inputs that I need. Like, we need to now go. And so figuring out what it was that was keeping me from being able to take that next step forward. And then also really trying to set my foundation for, like, I was just like, I need, like, the person who's doing this with me for sure is me. Yeah. And so I need to make sure that I'm up to the challenge and I'm ready to go. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. So if you're wondering about, what challenges might come down the line, or whether or not you're ready, or any of those questions probably were the driver behind me.
So this is also for people. I've run into a lot of people who are getting towards retirement age, and they're saying to themselves, what does it all look like? Where am I going to go? So I'm curious, you're just sitting here, you're what we called you, the color analyst here. What is, as you think about reflecting, we're just going to finish up this module here a little bit. What about you? What are you reflecting, listening to someone who's 26? You've got 2 daughters, obviously. What comes to mind? What comes to your mind as you're thinking about this for you?
What I admire, Helen, is in your mid-20s, taking such a look at yourself. I was more of what I call a coaster. I coasted. And after college, I just was lucky enough to find a job I really liked at an in-house ad agency in the Boston area, clicked with the team. That was really key for me. Really liked the person I reported to, learned about advertising, and I was a journalism major, psych minor, really like to analyze people when I can. And just love to
we'll
throw
get a
that.
full report when the day's over, Nate. You'll get all this, I'm sure.
But I just felt I was so connected to those people. So that was 40 years ago. 4 people from that group are still very close with me. And I have a very long birthday and Christmas card list, to the point where people make fun of me. I'm like, I don't let go of people once I find my keepers. I just keep them. So I just applaud you for looking, because my professional opportunities came along more by chance. I looked pre-internet, looked at an ad in the newspaper, found that job, and it was the only interview I went on, and I stayed for 8 years. I'm loyal, sometimes maybe to a, fault at times. And, but what I remember this, my grandmother, who I am told I was very much like her, my maternal grandmother. We were exactly 50 years apart. When I was 21, she was 71, she told me to remember being 21, just remember this time in your life, and remember 50 years from now, you're going to feel the same. She said, your body is a shell. And the only the only thing that changed for me, it was in my 20s, was my confidence level. And I remember driving my daughters one time, they were probably early teens. So sometimes I just felt like, wah, 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 as a mother. You're trying to impart wisdom and talk about your life experiences. We're driving through our hometown here in Maine, and I remember saying, oh, you know what my grandmother said to me once? I referenced the 20s, that comment about, I will always be the same. Yeah, I feel the same, but I also said, nobody told me how much I would change in my 20s. And I had to pull the car over for a conversation. I thought, well, they really want to know. I'm going to pull the car over for this one. So we had a really good talk about how I changed in my 20s. Professional development, personal development. I kind of came into my own way more than my teen years. My teen years, I was really young, and there was some immaturity there. I learned so much more in my 20s about who I really am. I didn't know at 21 who I really was. If that's how I experienced that chapter of my life.
And I love, I think for me, I'm always looking for context. I'm always looking for like the history or the whatever that may be. And so I'm sure your daughters were so happy to have that kind of background from you and to be able to hear that, because I think when you're young, you're kind of like, how does this go? Like, how does this turn out? And like that kind of thing. So to have heard that story, I'm sure that's wonderful guidance to provide.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
So the self-reflection exercise is, where am I today in my personal life? What are my strengths? What areas need improvement? And the last one is, am I satisfied with my current situation and why? Which I think also is a challenging question. So I'm curious what that was like, answering that question.
I think it's the question that needed to be asked, especially for me. And to, I wasn't with anybody. It was me alone. To really sit with that, it actually took me a minute. Like I was following the video as well. I really suggest that. I really suggest sitting alone and like thinking about that. Because when I had to answer it honestly, my honest answer was no. Yeah. And to have to say that was, not to have to say that, to realize that was powerful, because I think and it sounds like you both have the same tendency of like, I can go 1,000,000 miles per hour and it can look like I'm doing stuff.
Right.
And nobody ever asks you whether that stuff is really what you want. Yeah. People are just like, you get stuff done, and they'll give you more stuff. And so to really have to stop and say like, oh, maybe this isn't actually serving me the way that I wanted to. Mm. And to actually get to be like, okay, wow, like I'm 26. Like sometimes that feels really old and sometimes that feels really young. And so being able to like, okay, breaks, this is the time that we can start to change that. And now is the time to change that if the answer to that is no. Yeah. So I was really lucky to go to Greece a couple of weeks ago, actually in March. And the cooler part of that was I actually went with my aunt, which was amazing, because when do you get to spend 2 weeks alone with an extended family member? So that was really, really cool. And a lot of the same things happened, where like she got to tell me about her growing up and what that looked like, and her going through her 20s and her 30s and so on and so forth, and being able to bounce ideas off of her and kind of my own experiences, and really realizing you don't go through those years without hardship, right? Like you get to face these different challenges and you get to meet those challenges and so on and so forth. And so being able to kind of share, first of all, her own, but then share my own, where she finally she also kind of asked a lot of these similar questions, and so really kind of getting to talk that through with her. So yeah.
It's often we don't tap into our, adult elders like they used to in the old days. Everybody looked up to the elders and what was life like and so on. So, all right, so you're doing this self-reflective work, and then we're going to move into the second module, which is the video of finding your North Star. And you have to ask yourself, and this is the question I had a hard time with many years ago, which is, what is it you're trying to create for yourself? I mean, you're right. People go into 1,000 miles an hour. They're busy. Quote, I don't have time is a common thing you hear all the time. And the ways you can really tell whether someone's doing what they want to do is you just check their wallet and their calendar. Where are they spending their time and the money? And when you do that, people realize they're not doing what they want to go do, because you realize where all the time's being spent and the money. So when someone says, I don't have time, it's like, well, where are you putting your attention? And that's why you look at someone's wallet, which is where they're spending the money and that. So when you went through this North Star exercise, so I'll go through the questions, and I'm just going to go ask you what this process was like. So here are the questions. On the personal side, what would I like to do more of in my personal life? What would I like to do less of or stop doing altogether? And what behaviors or habits do I want to leave behind? And then professionally, where am I today in my professional life? What I would like to do more in my professional life? What I like to do less of or stop doing? And then what behaviors or habits do you want to leave behind? What was this page like? If you've done this, right? This one?
Yes, okay. Yes. So the big first thing was I was like, I'm having a hard time couching what's professional and what's personal.
That's great insight. Yeah, it's good. Very true. Yeah.
Because I integrate the two, which I think is awesome and powerful and wonderful. But it was also like, whoa, like Where does that one stop and the other one begins? And I was like, I don't know if this is always a strength. That was something that I was like, this might be something that, you should have an element of yourself that's not so intertwined with your professional life. And I realized a lot of the worth that I get for myself comes from what I do professionally. And I was just like, that seems, there may be an unlogical conclusion to that. And so there was a habit that I was kind of finding for myself. I was like, there's this, this worry, this stress, this thing that, not making this impact, whatever that impact might be. And it wasn't until I've really finished the North Star worksheet that I was able to like actually say what that purpose or impact might be.
So what was it? Go ahead and share it now. We'll jump to that if you want.
Yeah. So truly, I was just like, big picture, zooming out, my purpose, my impact that I seek to make is to help people realize that there are new levels, new heights of their performance available to them, whatever that might mean. Right. It might be that you want to do a marathon. It might be that you are looking to kick the business off or something like that. But it's this idea that, the human spirit is incredible in that we can face challenges and turn them into opportunities. And there's a lot of potential in the world to do that. So to help people realize that. And the way I do it is through physiology, through people learning about their bodies and their minds. But there's a million different ways to do that. And actually as you both were talking about your background, I was like, wow, like there's the different versions of this everywhere.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that I have always said, when people say, what's the number one trait you're looking for in someone you hire or whatever, it was curiosity. This intellectual curiosity, and people go, well, I thought you would say this or that, and I said, no, I think it's intellectual curiosity, and you have it in spades. Your curiosity is insatiable, and it's just the knowledge you have of so many things is incredible. And if you don't, I notice if you don't have the knowledge, you're going to go back and try to find what it is, and then have your view on it, which is awesome. And I've always loved that about you. So you go through this, you create this North Star, and people get what I say, you get really, really excited, scares the heck out of you, but it's not dangerous. It's a place you want to be. I'm listening to you thinking, boy, this sounds exciting, probably a little scary. Is this a fair place? Is that where you kind of at on this? Or?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So the next module then says, okay, before you get there, there's always self-esteem and imposter syndrome. Anybody ever had that experience? And I think self-esteem is something, and I give Mel, who helped me put this together, to really push this, because in my original workbook, I didn't have a lot about self-esteem, but it's a big deal. And when people are struggling with self-esteem, it holds them back quite a bit. The imposter syndrome is more common. People know that's when you feel like you're not really worthy of the job you have, or I'm going to get exposed. But boy, if you don't have self-esteem. So this one is really, to me, was an added value that, in talking to people that have gone through it, this has been the hardest one to get through, because you got to really admit some stuff, the hard truths. So I'm just going to read the questions, and I'm making this up as we go along here. Is this all right?
This is fantastic.
Okay. So this is like, where are my personal strengths and how have they helped me achieve my proudest accomplishments? I'll let you answer. You get a choice of which one you want to answer this. How's that? We'll do that this time. What do I appreciate about myself, and what do others know me? What do I appreciate about myself, and what do others who know me best value me? I'd love to hear the answer to that. What patterns or strengths do I notice in the activities and accomplishments that make me feel confident and fulfilled? That's a good question for you. Who in my life supports and encourages me? How can I lean on them as I grow? And how can I leverage my strengths and support networks as I create the life I want? So you can answer whichever one you want in there. However you want to answer, I'll let you go there.
Oh my goodness. So the first thing, and I'm actually kind of curious to hear from you, Sheila,
Yes.
because I know for me, when you were asking in your videos, which we did so well at, what your strengths were, I was like, I don't know. Yeah. And it's a really hard question to ask. And I don't know, as you were talking about building that confidence in your 20s, I just kind of want to hear from you before I keep on talking, what that was like for you, and, when you're asked that question, and maybe how has that changed over your experience?
Yeah, because back, so when we were sort of growing up, and maybe it was just the experience, because you and I have talked a lot about this kind of stuff was not things, we didn't have this, you didn't have the videos, you didn't have, didn't exist, so I should let you speak, so I'm jumping in. But in my life, it was almost like you had to just figure it out on your own. There was no, other than the people, your parents or neighbors you ran into, and you just through osmosis were like, okay, I guess that's the way we do things. And there was not a lot of this stuff available to kind of contemplate this stuff. I've been described as very curious. And as a kid, I was curious, but I'm thinking as you're talking about, well, where would I have gone? I gravitated to sports because the coaches were the people that would give you feedback. Hey, your strengths are, Thorny, you're very good on defense, or you got to work on this. But other than that, I didn't get a lot of, I didn't have like a lot of gurus that could teach you or talk about this stuff. So I would say for me, it was through osmosis. Looking at other people and saying, I guess this, and then trying that, and they go, no, you're not very good at this, or strength. In fact, I had a music teacher in 7th grade said, you could be a hell of a musician. I was playing the cornet. My dad had a band. My uncle was the band director up in Foxcroft, Maine for 17 years. Still a legend, I'm told, up there. So a lot of music in the family. And but he said, you're never going to be very good if you don't quit sports. You can't do both. Nowadays, you can, but he's like, you got to do one or the other.
Right.
So I quit the cornet, never played again, and I love music. My dad was a piano player. We had him at the house, and he played piano all the time. And I look back, God, I think I had strengths to be a musician. I could have been. I can't sing to save the life of me, but I think I could have been, but I was discouraged out of it. So that's how I discovered my strengths. Okay, I guess I can't do both, so I'll just play sports.
Yeah. Wow. You can still play an instrument at this age, Mike.
So true.
That might be a nice way to spend some time.
If anybody who's watches this from Yankee Candle, we did an event real quick. I had a guy who was the head of like copywriting, and he came to see one day, and he said, these events you do are really good. But he said, I don't know my backstory. And I said, no. And he goes, I'm actually he did plays and musicals, like in his other part of his life. And I was like, no, I didn't know that. He said, his name was Bruce. He said, would you like me to help you create something like this to make the event even better? Because I was doing like Johnny Carson, hired a band, trying all kinds of stuff to make it fun. It was a celebration of the year, would honor the winners of all these awards, and the team loved it. They'd get dressed up, and they never get dressed up. And so he's in my office with me, and he's like, all right, we're going to do a musical. And I go, Bruce, real quick, I don't know how to sing. He goes, doesn't matter, we're going to do a musical. And Ellen was my assistant outside the office. It was literally right where that door is, about far away. My door was like right here. And Bruce go, okay, we're going to sing this song. And he in the room would be singing. And then he'd leave, and I'd come outside and open the door, and Ellen would be like, what are you doing?
That's awesome.
But I loved it, because I loved to sing and dance and music, but I just didn't have a venue to go do it. And so he got us in tuxes, top hat, this big ballroom, and I'm on one end, he's the other end, and the music starts playing. We had the band there, and both of us are walking in different parts of about 120 people probably in there. And the CEO of the company was in there, and my boss was in there, and they're watching this, and there's a picture of them going, what are you doing? And I'm walking up with a top hat, singing at the top of my lungs. I can't sing to save my life.
Yeah, we need to get that out of the archives. That's
that?
got to exist somewhere.
I have a picture of it. I don't have the musical, but anyway, but those strengths you just had to explore. I didn't feel like there was stuff for me, or if they were, I didn't know what they were. But anyway, I jumped the shark there. Go ahead.
No, thanks. No, this is the flow of the conversation, so that's great. So I'm thinking back to that job that I referenced right out of college. I'd gotten married right out of college and then lived away for a year, came back to New England and found this job in this in-house ad agency and tight-knit group within the small ad team. And what like you're pointing out, Mike, I didn't have what I would consider a mentor till there.
Yeah.
So I was close to your age when I really can look back and think, oh, that person was a mentor. And it happened to be my boss, and we just had a very strong connection. Her daughter is still one of my best friends today. And but I remember, Mike, telling you this story once. Looking back, I'm prouder of myself than I was in that moment. Yeah. The CEO was brilliant. It was the first IBM compatible computer to go up against IBM in the country, in the industry. So it was a very exciting time to be, there in like the 80s. That was like the big 80s craze of technology becoming, it was a life changer. There were computers on our desks. We hadn't had them yet. And I was the print media buyer.
Do we sound old or what?
We are ancient.
You're like, no computers? Like, what are you talking about? Old
No,
guys.
none. And I was the print media assistant buyer, so I was tracking ads. They were not like the digital, relay of materials we have these days, for 80 magazines, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, The Times, without a computer. There was a handwritten system I had created. Now the computers show up. They put one on my desk, and I said, wait, what's happening here? Well, now you have to learn to use it. What we've been selling, you now have one. So I was there for 8 years, and most of it was so great. Yet then the founder had a different vision for me, and it didn't match mine. And one day, the ad agency, we were moving into a building right next door, same campus, small company. The art director he oversaw the department. He came back into the office after learning about the footprint of the office we would take in the next door building. And he had this kind of sick look on his face, and he came over to me and he said, I don't know how else to tell you this, but everyone is moving except you. And I looked at him, and he said, this former, the CEO, wanted me to go into the sales department, which was in a completely different town, a whole different division. And that's not what I wanted to do. I loved the work I was doing. And so Monday morning, the whole department has moved into this other building. I showed up for work. I brought all my materials for those 80 magazines, found an empty desk, and set up shop. And so for 2 weeks, I came into work with my ad team. This CEO would say good morning to me. I would say good morning to him. And every day I would call his assistant to ask for a meeting to talk about what's up, like what's going on here. I don't want to move to this division of sales. This is where I belong. So 2 weeks later, on a Friday morning, he calls me directly, speakerphone. I can hear it right now. And he says, I'll meet you today. ... I wait till 5. So at 5 o'clock, I'm going in. And my team waited till I came out. And he and this VP of sales were cornering me, basically. It was probably harassment when you look at it, to get me to agree to come in on Monday to that other department in another town to work for this VP of sales, who I didn't think I was going to learn anything from, because I saw his style of, he only followed what the CEO said. And I just am a decisive person. I thought, this is just not going to fit my style. So I left there and didn't really give them an answer. I did not agree to come. I left. I thought, they're not going to give up. I need to get out of this room. So I left the room. My ad team had stayed to see if I was okay. And I remember the creative director, John, he was trying to come over and give me a hug. And I was like holding it together. I just said, no hugs. And I never went back. And the CEO was shocked I didn't go back. And I thought, it's time for a change. And I think I was 28 at the time. I just didn't want to jump as high as he said. I thought, this isn't my style. So I am going to buck the system a little bit. And this is my life. I don't have to do what he says I have to do. And that then became empowering. He didn't know I was getting my real estate license, which then I thought, I don't really want to work nights and weekends. So I got another job. And then life changed. I became pregnant with my first daughter a year later. My life went in a different direction, but the change was good. I just didn't expect it to. It was an unexpected change. And my mother probably wasn't surprised. She would probably think that that was a bold move. I was pretty bold as a teenager, but I felt like that is my absolute right to say no to this. I'm not going to say yes to this. I am leaving this company now. So I did.
I think the thing that's back to strength as we're talking, that's why these conversations are you just start flowing and things come to your head. But the thing on strength is I look back on it, people give you feedback, you have to be willing to receive it and accept it. And part of it, the problem I had was that I never wanted to accept that I had any strength. I was always like trying to figure out how do I fit in versus like, hey, I'm really good at this. And I look back at my career and it evolved into always getting sent in, not always, but either I was attracted to or got sent into environments that hey, reimagine this thing. I was never the subject matter expert, and I kept doing it. And then as I got finally, when I was working through this stuff 10, 12 years, I was like, why do I keep getting sent to those? What is it about me? And then you have all those, the predictive index or all those different behavioral things you can take, and you start reading it. So part of it for you, in your age, is when people are giving you feedback of stuff, you just start, does that feel right to me? Is that something that does work for me? I was always resisting it because I think if you've got some trauma that happened to you or some self-doubt from someone telling you you're worthless or whatever, it's hard to accept that feedback. I think is what I find as I reflect on this conversation, just sitting here, it was always like, no, it's not really a strength of mine. You didn't listen to it. Mm. And I think as I got older, I started saying, this is where your real wheelhouse is. And so I could go into companies and say, I need to get a really good HR person, a really good finance person, a really good lawyer. And they go, oh no, we got those areas covered. Just go drive the business. And I said, no, I will feel safer when I have 3 positions over here covered, because those are the biggest risk I could run, legally, human, issues, or financially. And I don't have the core competencies. I can make the tough decisions, but I need to have someone really competent. The other stuff, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And being able to say that out loud and be comfortable with it, not feeling going to get fired or rejected, took a while. Mm. But I think as when people give you feedback, instead of fighting it, which is what I did, I started, I should appreciate that. That tells me something. That's a gift. Or you get an email. I always say third-party, unsolicited feedback is the best. When someone sends you a note and said, hey, I really appreciate this, that, and the other thing, hold on to it. Keep it. And you'll start seeing patterns, I think, and you'll be like, this is probably where I'm really, really good at it. And then where does that lead me if I'm really good at that? And let the other stuff you're not as good at. I'm not handy. I'm handy with a phone. I call the plumber. I tried one time to fix the sink, and I tore the whole thing apart, and I couldn't figure out to put it back together again. And Maggie we were young in our marriage, and I was like, I want to be good at this, but it wasn't a strength of mine, but I thought I could. And I said, I can't put this thing back together again, so I called the plumber. I got home that night, and I go, how'd it go with the plumber? And Maggie goes, that is the last time you're ever going to touch anything in this house. The plumber could not figure out to put the sink back together either. He had to redo the whole thing. I was like, okay, good to know. I can use the phone next time. That's good. So I'm good with the phone, But I think hearing the feedback and trying to process it and accept it as real was something I got better as I got older, now that I've been thinking about this conversation. So
yeah. No, I think something that I just related to in your story is that that confidence to say, it's time for me to transition, it's time for me to step away. So I think as I was going through this, I was, I have a hard time answering the strengths question, and that needs to become a strength. But I think something I recognized as something that can be both a strength and a weakness is that I like to please people. And so what does that mean? I like to be positive. I like to be optimistic. I like to be excited. And that has served me really, really well in a lot of my pursuits. However, on the other side of it, I think you said you were maybe loyal to a fault sometimes. And so I can run into the same thing because I'm like, oh, well, how is this maybe going to impact the other person? And I think that's always important to think about. And then this really helped me realize, okay, there's a point in time where you always should consider others and consider what this might do, or what you making a transition might impact others, and how it might impact others. But there's also that moment where you need to jump, because you staying in that position isn't necessarily serving them or you in that way. So I think when I think of the things that I hear most from people and the things that I try to cultivate myself, it is that positivity and that optimism, and that person who is ready to, an opportunity comes my way, and I like to step up to the plate. I like to try. I haven't tried to fix a sink, but that opportunity luckily has not yet come my way. Being able to do that, and then keeping that white belt mentality and saying this is my opportunity to learn, and knowing that you're not going to be an expert in everything. Plumbers are amazing, but I don't think I could do it.
The cool thing now, though, is with YouTube and all that, I've tried some stuff, and I'm fixing stuff now, so I'm trying, but I'm not going to go become the plumber. But yeah, it's interesting, and part of what you're describing is the messiness of all this, and letting go of the fact that you don't have all the answers, and it's not easy. But when we get to the personal trust community, the people that you surround yourself with will start to share with you, hey man, you're worrying too much about this stuff, let it go. And if you trust them enough, you'll take that and you'll start moving and you'll start to realize, wow, if I just have these people, I won't get distracted by all this stuff. Because saying no is really hard.
Yeah, and
There's a people pleaser.
absolutely, and the power of mentorship, to recognize like you said no and it all worked out, and getting to hear how, and take from the experiences of those who have been through it and have come out, not only come out on the other side but come out stronger. I mean, I only just met you, but I can tell there's a lot there that I'm excited to hear about. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
So yeah, self-doubt is really a hard thing to overcome, man. It's just it's a tough one. So, all right, let me see what we got next here. So thank you for that, Helen. So again, this self-esteem, self-doubt and stuff, as you go through the workbook and answer these questions, hopefully you picked up some of that as you listen to us chat about that. I feel like the biggest thing that has helped me tremendously, and I get better as I go along, is building out what I refer to as a personal trust community. I'm sure you guys go to network events and network things, and I have found myself over the years, as soon as I say there's a networking event, the amount of people that just get stressed or anxiety going to a networking. I don't know, you like networking events or?
I'm trying to get better at them.
See, but it feels like you got to show up and you got to be, you got to have all the answer stuff and be there. And it's like, I don't like those networking. I think when you have your North Star and you're very clear who you are and what you're trying to do. For example, I work with Vistage right now, and if people ask me what I did when I first started 4 years ago, it was like, well, I work for Vistage, I'm an executive coach, we do peer advisory. Everyone's mind goes to someone they know or they know what that means, and you become a nobody, you're like just one of everybody. And now that I have more clarity for myself, I say, I'm trying to humanize leadership. And the response I get in that answer is completely different. Often it's like, well, how the hell do you do that? My boss is this or that. But I feel very comfortable that I can go to it. So now when I go to networking events, I have a lot more clarity. And when people say, what do you do? Because that's always the question you cringe at. Do I explain it? Do I just say what it is? Because most people, when they try to explain what they do, you're like, what do you do again? Unless it's like a teacher or something, it's really hard. So I think finding this personal trust community is important. And I want to talk about that a little bit because obviously you're new in this process. Have you gotten to that in this workbook about starting to build it out?
Yeah. I completed the homework, I promise.
Oh, no, you don't have to. No, it's all right.
No.
One of the things I talk about, and Sheila, when I did that event at Hyde School, that was probably the best thing that I got out of that was I tried to figure out, so this was a program with middle school and high school kids. There was 1,200 kids, and Sheila's sister, who I had not met at the time, Susan, invited me to go speak and do the workshops with these kids. And I'm thinking, how am I going to have a conversation with middle and high school kids and apply it to this work? But Susan was convinced that it was a good idea. And one thing I love about Susan, and I think it's related back to this, is when I was working for a company in the synthetic turf business, I'd never met Susan. You must have talked to Susan about me. And you came back one time, one of our coffee things or something, and you said, Susan said, Mike's working for a synthetic turf company? And I said, have I ever met Susan? And you said, no. And she said, my sister wants to know why, given what Mike's doing, what he's all about, why is he working for a synthetic turf company? And it was such a great insight from someone I thought, obviously I have clarity of where I'm going because people are picking up on that. And then here I am working for a company and it was always down to this thing, I'm doing what I want to do, or am I doing what I need to do? Mm. And need to do is with validity. You were talking about that before. I'm trying to please people or validity. And that always struck with me. But as you started to build this out, I went to that event and I said, how do I communicate this? So we did it in two simple things. We created what is the perspective you're at today in North Star, and then you created your personal trust community. And I told the kids this, and it really resonated with them. I said, look, when you have something in your head and you don't say it out loud, it's like 20% of the time it's going to really come to fruition. So we all have these dreams and wishes. Even at that age they did. It was amazing. And I said, but if it's in your head and you say it out loud, there's about a 50% chance it's actually going to come to life. But if you have it in your head, say it out loud, and you write it down, 75 to 80% chance. If it's in your head, you say it out loud, write it down, and then you laminate it. And I showed them these laminated sheets. It's going to happen.
What?
And some kid in the middle said, he raised his hand and he said, I want to be a professional basketball player. Someone goes, really? And some other kid yelled at what they want to do. And I said, have you ever said this out loud? And they said, no. And I said, why? They said, because I'm going to be judged. I don't know these people in it because it was all different schools. I'm not judged here, so I'm okay saying out loud. And I got into this personal trust community, and I want to talk about this to kind of wrap up if we can here. So this is something that I have learned over time. This really was an evolution because I think, okay, my mother, I trust my mother, she's in my personal trust community, my wife is, my kids or whatever. But then I went to get ready for the Ironman, and I brought the idea up, and my wife was like, that's not a good idea. You're going to get hurt. That's bad. Dad, why are you going to do that? And I thought, well, I trust them, but they're not very helpful. And so I created something, and it's physical well-being, your spiritual well-being, your social well-being, your emotional well-being, your intellectual well-being. In other words, there's different aspects of how we go through life that we need different kinds of people for. And it was 2017 when I first started playing around with this. I was at Northeastern University. It was a junior class. I forget the topic they were in, and I was going through this. And Northeastern's a very old school. They didn't have a lot of stuff to work with. They had an old chalkboard. And I was writing the chalkboard trying to explain this, and the kids just didn't get it. And so out of my head came out this idea of a trampoline. So I said, hey, how many of you guys have had or have a trampoline? And most all the kids did. And I said, when you get them, when you walk around neighborhoods, what do you see? And they said, well, there's usually walls up on the trampolines. And I said, yeah, when I grew up, there were no walls because kids just bounce up on the trampolines. If they fell off and got hurt, just get back up and keep going. I said, but society, we start putting these walls up to protect ourselves, and we never get to really experience who we really are. And I said, so I want you to think about this personal trust community, which is why it's built the way it is, as a trampoline. And I said, you got the trampoline, and Helen's in the middle of it, or Sheila's in the middle of it, and she's got a North Star, and she's going down this road, but then she has a bad day, and she starts going off the edge. And we don't want walls up, because we don't want to stop from getting there. The walls kind of give you, okay, I'm not going to go there, I'm going to play small. Say, no, we're playing big here, we're going to go. And so we move the trampoline so she stays centered. We just keep moving it, but if she keeps doing it day after day after day, we're not judging, we're going to say, Helen, time out. Something's going on, you're off track here quite a bit, let's pause, and you sit in the middle and you tell us what's going on, and then we support you. And you either get to support socially, emotionally, intellectually, physically, or spiritually, depending on where you're at. And so in that case, for me, if I'm dealing with someone, I'm feeling kind of down, I call Father John. He's my spiritual leader. I've known him since 4th grade. I have my own challenges with the Catholic Church. Sorry, Father John, if you happen to watch this thing, I apologize. You and I know this. He and I can have a very deep conversation. Or read a book called The Four Agreements, because it's a really powerful book for me, and I just kind of pause. When it's emotionally, there's a guy, Tim Dixon, who's a mental skills coach. I met Tim years ago. And these are the kind of people that if you're having a rough go, you can just text them and say, Tim, I need you, buddy. And Tim may be on the other end, be very, very busy. So difference between a network and this in my mind as I think about it, I know I can text him. He could be super busy, but I trust him that he's going to get to me when he can. He may send me a text and say, Thorny, I'm really busy right now. How about 6 o'clock tomorrow, this, that, and the other thing? And I know that's the best he can do. Versus networking people or transactional, it's like, oh, God, fucking Thorny's calling me. Jesus Christ, I don't have time for him right now. And they put it down. That's a difference. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of these people in your life, and there's going to be some people, and there could be podcasts you listen to, whatever. And when I were around with these kids, they were really excited about this. They were like, this really meant a lot to them because they don't have close-knit friends that they can trust and share these ideas with. Same with adults. In fact, if you talk to adults and ask them how many close friends they have, it is frightening. Nobody has a lot of close friends. So being able to think about who are those people in your life today or people you wish you had that you could talk to. So you create your North Star, and you're really clear what the North Star is, and then you want to be able to communicate that North Star to someone. You need to figure who these people are. And so the first step is to find the person you feel safest with and most comfortable with, is share whatever that North Star is, that dream you have, because you know they won't judge you, they'll be excited for it, and they'll want to help you. Because guess what? People also don't ask for help. I asked the kids at this high school, middle school, I said, raise your hand if you're comfortable asking for help. It was 25, 26, right, in each group roughly?
Probably close to that.
Maybe one kid would raise a hand and say, I'm comfortable asking help. Then I said, how many of you love helping other people? Everybody raised a hand. And even they were kind of dumbstruck by it. And I said, well, the statistics are there's a 44% higher chance that if you ask someone for help with clarity, they're going to help you, because everybody wants to help. They can lift it up like you do. So as you went through this, one of the things I've run into in talking to people is, especially when maybe they're younger or haven't done a lot of work on deep relationships like this, they go, Mike or Mr. Thorne, I don't have these kind of people, And in yours, you wrote books, you have podcasts. Like, how does that even work? And so for me, there are people that I can listen to certain podcasts that can get me back on track or get me excited or I can learn something from. So I do have, Brene Brown. I love the work she does, right? And then there are people on here. So for you, first of all, what was this like going through this? And did it feel like this could be grounding as you think about your North Star and getting this? Tell me what that was like.
So, first of all, I really appreciate that you started with the individual and then the workbook ends with you kind of looking outward and kind of looking around, because it can feel isolating when you're suddenly looking at yourself and you're like, well, it's down to me. Like, I got to do it. Yeah. And so that's number one. Number two, I just have to say it. The absolute nerd in me, I love a laminator. So I'm just like, when you we were like, oh yeah, you got to laminate it. I was like, yes, give me a reason to use it. So I just love that you have yours laminated too. And I just thought that was so powerful. And I really do believe in that of say it, write it down, laminate it. And I love that.
It's a metaphor. By the way, anyone who's a statistics nerd on here, you could try to find those stats I gave you. You're not going to find them. I mean, but they're rough and tough what it is. Even at Northeastern, that young lady goes, Mr. Thorne, that trampoline thing, I was just on Google. I don't see this science anywhere in this thing. Can you tell me where I could find this? And I was like, oh, I think her name was Karen. I go, Karen, I'm sorry. I just made this up sitting here as we're talking. I just think, and then she said this. I forgot to mention this. She goes, Mr. Thorne, let me ask you a question. So we're 20, 21 years old. She said, my family's in Japan. I'm here in the United States. I'm getting torn both ways about, do I want to go back to Japan when my family wants me? Or do I stay here? She said, as I grow in my life and my career, does the trampoline get heavier and bigger and taller? And so I need different people in my trust community, or does it always stay the same? I thought, wow, that's a great question. I never even thought of that. And I said, it's interesting. I said, some people will stay with you, and some, yeah, you're going to grow out of it maybe. Doesn't mean they're worse or less, because you are carrying more burdens as you get older, but I thought, what a great metaphor. I took you off track there. Sorry.
No, and I think there's something so important there where when you are in your early 20s and maybe you finished college and you're moving forward, there's this weird moment where you're like, where are my friends?
Where are my people?
Where are my friends? Where are my people? Because you're like, you've always were in, I mean, I was lucky, I was in Falmouth, I grew up there, I never left, like in terms of for grade school. So I always had the same 100 and whatever some odd people in my grade. Yeah. And then I graduated and I went to college and I did cross country and I ran and I always had people and stuff. And so I think there's a real problem there for people my age where they're just like, I don't know where my people are. Yeah. Maybe you find them at work, and how do you make friends? And you're going back to kindergarten essentially. Like, how do I do this? So that's something that's I think so key. Yeah. But then also, so this particular exercise, I've been so blessed in my life where I've always been in a community. My neighborhood is a wonderful community, and as I got older and I was on a team, that was a wonderful community. And then it just so happened that when I was in my senior year of high school, I dropped into this really, we're allowed to swear, kick-ass community of people who, it was in a gym culture, they were pushing themselves, they wanted to grow, and it taught me a lot about, first of all, what key parts of myself that I need to cultivate, but then also it just taught me the power of community and just how important it is to always have that around and to always not only seek it, but cultivate it. And so I've just been so lucky through that where, I think you just said when you have somebody that you really appreciate, you don't let them go. And there's an art to that. And that's so important. And so I'm one of those people where if you come into my life and I see that value in our relationship and hopefully offer value to you, I'm not going to let it go. And so doing this, I was like, who do I go for? Luckily, I'm a physical therapist and a personal trainer, so everybody I think comes to me for their physical stuff. So it means I have options for walking buddies and so on and so forth. Yeah. It's a really good thing to cultivate for yourself. Yeah. But it just made you realize all the special people who are in your life, and then broader than that, it made you break down. There's so much information out there. We don't have an information problem. We just have an implementation problem. And so it's wonderful to kind of break down, if I want some, inspiration and maybe some figuring out how to approach like a business problem, I really appreciate Tim Ferriss, or, it's starting to pull some of those people that you're like, what are those podcasts that I always listen to? And it took me from this moment of being like, feeling a little isolated and being like, oh, strengths and weaknesses, and I only have this and that, and then being like, oh wow, you have the power of like absolutely everybody who's come into your life, of every book you read, of all the podcasts and everything that you take in, and you just get to create whatever version out of all of that. And I think the personal trust community, then being able to bounce those ideas off of and turning to somebody and be like, this is what I'm thinking, what do you think? I think I just appreciated that so much. Yeah.
And what's interesting is, and I found myself, you were always asking people for advice, and like, do they really have the capacity and capability to give the advice I'm looking for? Why do I just keep asking? You were saying that before about you're always asking the people to get validation. This to me says, you know what, if I really need help in a particular area, I don't need to go to like 10 people, because then I'm going to get overwhelmed. Some people don't know me as well. Some people don't trust the same way. Even in the Vistage community that I work with, there are some people that do the work I do. I can have conversation with them, and others I can't. And I've learned that over time. Even though we're all, quote, in it for the same reasons, and we all caring people, just some people just aren't going to be great fits for me. And why am I going to waste my time asking them for help when they're not going to really give me what I'm looking for? So getting clarity on these people and then asking for help, it's really, really critical. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add that it just feels like going through that workbook, I was like, this is amazing. I think I have to do it again next year. Like, I think that this continues to change and that this continues to grow, and that you get to, it's hard to laminate the personal trust community because I'm like, oh, I need to add, or I'm like, that kind of thing. So that one, I think this is a yearly thing of reflection, and it's a fantastic resource, and I'm just so glad that you brought it into the world.
Thank you. And that's a great way to end this, because one of the things I ran into when I talked to a lot of people is they think it's so black and white. It's like it has to be done this way, or am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? That's not the way this is your personal thing. It just gives you a chance to do what you just did, which was, I think I'm going to do this every year. I'm not going to laminate. That's what that's all about, because it's not my story, it's yours.
Oh, and don't get me wrong, I'm still going to laminate it. I'll laminate it every year. No, but.
Yeah, and that's a metaphor, but it does. It's now I've got it written down, and by the way, both of you are in here.
Yeah.
Helen and you.
Where am I?
Where are you? Oh, God. Sheila is in my social well-being.
Thank you.
Because I struggle with social, relationships, because I always feel like I'm going to be judged. I'm going to be abandoned by friends. So if you look at the list here, Sheila's on here, my wife, daughters, my sister, our next door neighbors, because even though they have a different lifestyle than us, I feel like they just accept us for who we are, and we're very different than them. My best friend from college and my brother-in-law is on here, and it's a very short list.
Thank you.
But the social piece of it is, I don't have anybody here that I would trust more than you to have a conversation with on stuff. So
Thanks.
because we talk about hard things, but we have fun. We're going coffee, we're ice cream. It's just, it feels very. I get lifted when we finish those conversations. The only thing that I struggle with is that conversation about your experience about out of body and different things, which we'll have that one again. That's another one. But anyway, look, I hope for all of you at least get to experience some of what happens in this process, and I encourage you to ask yourself, am I really living the life I want to live? Am I having the experiences I want? And if not, I feel like this workbook can be a helpful tool along with other things you work on, but try it. And you can find this both on YouTube and on my own website, which I'm sure we'll include in the notes after this conversation is over. Thanks for listening.